Hello, today we're going to be taking a closer look at the console. So the console of the organ is a little bit like the driver's seat of a car. You are able to sit here in one spot and control an entire organ with its thousands of pipes located in several different levels around the organ loft. So first of all, we need to turn the organ on. So unlike other instruments, you can't just come and start playing. You have to turn this switch up, and basically that starts an electric current, which powers the rotation of a blower, which creates wind pressure, and that is necessary for the pipes to sound. In the past, so prior to the 19th century, we didn't have electricity to help with creating that wind pressure, so instead there needed to be assistants who would come along and manually pump these feeder bellows, which would create the wind pressure. And so that often makes me think about how economical people must have had to be if they wanted to practice on a main organ, because there were people who were pumping while they were playing, so they had to be very careful with their time. So one of the most obvious features of the organ, of course, is the keyboards. And so here at Gloucester, we have 4 keyboards, one on top of the other. So each of these keyboards correspond with a group of pipes, which I'll talk about more later. So 4 manuals and then the pedal board. So very generally speaking, the keyboards can have 2 types of action, so one or the other. It can be mechanical or electrical. And so historically it was mechanical, meaning that you didn't need any electrical connection at all to connect the note to the pipe. And so this meant that historic organs have consoles that are immediately adjacent to the pipes. It just had to be right there because as you were playing, there was mechanical connection to the pipe. This also means that if you have multiple stops drawn, it will become heavier and heavier because you're actually using the weight of your hands to activate the pipes to speak. On the other hand, with electrical connections like here, if you have full organ on, it doesn't make any difference because it's really an electric signal that is traveling from the note to the pipe. And this also means that the console does not need to be immediately adjacent to the stops, which is the case here. Although here the console is quite close anyway, but it's not immediately adjacent. And if we wanted to, we could even put this on the other end of the cathedral and it could still play the organ as long as there was an electric cord, usually a really big fat cord that would connect the console to the pipes. And so this is how it's possible for some churches or cathedrals to have 2 consoles on 2 different ends of the cathedral playing the same set of pipes. And it's quite funny because there have been people who would notice that there's a console on one side of the church without anyone playing it and wonder why is the organ playing? Well, it's because there's a different console where someone else is able to play. Not a ghost playing, but a real person. So as I was saying earlier, each of the divisions match with one of the manuals. So from left to right, we have swell, pedal, west positive, great, and choir. So swell is right here, and west positive is right here, and great here, and choir here. And then pedal, of course, would be played by the pedal board. So if you were to draw stops on each of these, it would just by default play on each of these manuals or pedal board only. And so in addition to that, we have some draw knobs right here that look like stops, but they're not actually stops. They're called couplers. And what this does is it'll allow you, you can draw stops from a given manual. For example, I've drawn some stops on the swell. And this is where it would normally sound, but I've drawn the swell to great coupler, which means that in addition to sounding on the swell, I can also play it on the great. And it sounds exactly the same, but it gives me more access because I can play on either one. Without it, nothing happens. Silent. One other thing I want to point out is where the word stop comes from. So in the early organ, all of the pipes sounded without your being able to select one over the other. So if I were to play one note, then all of the pipes within all of the ranks of that note are going to sound. So people thought, why don't we stop up some of the pipes so that only certain ones of them sound? So basically that's how we developed this option of drawing stops so that just one rank of pipe is sounding. So another thing I want to point out is that we have these buttons, which are called pistons. You can press them with usually with your thumb right here between the manuals, and then we also have the same thing functionally called toe studs right here, which you can press with your feet. So what these does is that you can set beforehand a combination of stops. So here's a setter button, and then let's say that I wanted these. I can just draw whatever I want, and then I press the setter button and I press one of the buttons, one of the pistons, and then it will remember what I've chosen. And so what happens is that I can be playing along, and then when I want something different, so for example, let's say I'm playing like this, and then I wanted something more, I can go like that. And there, I was able to add more stops on without having to go and actually draw them out because this did it for me. And so you might notice that we have these panels right here with numbers on them, and what that does is it gives us even more memory space for remembering these combinations. So basically we have 4 different channels, each of which have 96 different levels, and on each of the levels I can save different combinations of stops, and so that gives me almost 400 different settings that I could set if I wanted to. And when I come back tomorrow, I can access exactly everything that I've set. So that's what all of those buttons are for. And then finally, we have right here these 2 sort of larger pedals that are above the pedal board, and those are called the Swell Petals. And what that does is it opens and closes the shutters of the Swell box. So the stops of the Swell division are located within a box, and the box has Venetian blind-like shutters, which if you open that, the Venetian blinds will open up, and then when you close it, they will come tightly closed. So there's a huge difference really with the box closed. So for example, it's quite quiet when it's completely closed, and then if I wanted to open it, it really gets a lot louder with the box completely opened. Yeah, so I hope that you enjoyed everything that I've talked about today. There's so much more to explore about the organ. Every organ is unique. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.